Well, you know I come from a long line of cocks just like me, who never stop believing despite our history. Cause though there's been heartbreak and oh so many tears, I know one day I won't have to say wait until next year. Cause I watched every quarter of 2010, from the beat down of Bama to Atlanta's bitter end. And I've cheered for Alshon Jeffrey, Melvin Ingram and Connor Shaw, and Jadeveon and Marcus were the best I ever saw. Yeah, and I hate them Georgia Bulldogs, Florida Gators, and Rocky Top. Oh, what else can I say? I'm just a big old cock.
Well, what better way to kick off tonight's show than listening to Patrick Davis? And of course, as you see in the bottom of the screen, the Gamecock Central kickoff party is on August 19th, and that night is going to be absolutely electric. Of course, you have a lot of positive momentum as we head into the month of August. You had some big news today before we even got to freaking noon. We will definitely be talking about that, as well as looking ahead to USC reporting to fall camp on Thursday. You have media day that day. First practice was on Friday. And then even going back this past weekend, there was some exciting news on the Garnet Trust front. And when you talk about players like we're going to talk about tonight with Dylan Stewart and some of the potential prospects that South Carolina hopes to be able to land over the next couple of days and weeks, NIL, certainly it is never a bad thing to be able to have that as good as you can. He's Intern Joe. I'm Mike Uva. Appreciate you guys tuning in tonight for what will be a fun one. Because anytime South Carolina is able to land a big-time commitment, right, whether it be through the transfer portal, I think back to the night when Spencer Rattler announced his decision to come to South Carolina. I think back to even G.G. Jackson a year ago. I think back to this past February, the roller coaster that was with Nicholas Harbor. There is always a positive atmosphere in Columbia. And USC desperately needed this from a recruiting standpoint, Joe, because despite only landing one recruit in the month of July, USC, with the commitment today of Stewart, they move up to now 17th on On3's consensus team recruiting rankings.
Yeah, Mike, absolutely huge day for South Carolina and Shane Beamer. Dylan Stewart, I mean, we've talked about him so much in the weeks leading up to this commitment. Obviously, you thought it was going to be a very big July. It turns out to be a very big August and a very big start to August as well. Happy August to everybody watching. What a wonderful evening. Yes, great start, Frederick, to the month of August for South Carolina. I mean, Dylan Stewart he's one of them ones, like Sterling Lucas said on Twitter today. Also, congratulations to him on the birth of his twin girls. And that was awesome, too. The screenshot that Coach Beamer shared of the FaceTime with Coach Lucas. Obviously, Coach Lucas was very big on Dylan Stewart and was his primary recruiter, and a very big reason why Dylan Stewart chose South Carolina. So big day for Sterling Lucas, big day for South Carolina.
And look, we talked about it on this program. It seems like, I think back to just the last 2 months, Joe, specifically talking about the RPM and where it was, right? And we had clips about it when it was, I think, just around like 3%. And you and I were saying, hey, look, I know the numbers right now on On3 when you look at the RPM, which as a reminder, some folks, because you got to think about it, On3, it's been around. We've been around for just 2 years. We moved over to On3 from rivals in even shorter time period than that. But the point being is RPM is supposed to give you that real-time feel, right? You have the crystal balls. You have all that other stuff out there when it comes to recruiting. RPM is supposed to give you a live feel of what is going on. That's why, if you remember from the Nicholas Harbor commitment, that day was an absolute roller coaster. And I know there were some people out there, they were saying, oh, good job on the RPM. And then what happened? Well, Shane Beamer later that day, he shared how much of a roller coaster it was. Getting that phone call, that one of those text message, voice messages that disappear at 3 a.m, and how his gut just sunk down into his stomach. So by committing today, by telling recruiting insiders out there in the industry that he's done visiting schools, it is massive. However, if you've been following along, whether it be listening to this show, whether it be listening to our colleagues, Chris Clark and Wes Mitchell, and just listening to what's been said on Gamecock Central, today shouldn't surprise you. Maybe it surprised you in the sense that there was no commitment date. Wait until this date. It was just coming on out and saying, hey, I'm committing to the Gamecocks. Today's news should not surprise you because USC has been persistent and they have done a tremendous job of making sure that they weren't going to stay comfortable when it came to a kid like this. Getting him on campus this past weekend for the cookout was absolutely massive. Massive. And I'm sure there were some people that wanted to hear earlier, right? They wanted to hear something, but at that point, Dylan Stewart already knew that he wanted to be a Gamecock. So it doesn't surprise me how quickly it happened.
No.
But man, just the way it all played out. Hey, no commitment date. I'm just going to say it right now. I'm done. I'm a Gamecock.
Yeah, absolutely. And it fits with Dylan, just kind of the way he is, being able to interact with him a lot last summer when he was here for camp and stuff. I mean, you kind of sense that this was the way it was going to be. And also, too, I mean, I think it's really big for South Carolina just being able to go get a guy like Dylan Stewart. Like I mentioned it on Twitter or X, whatever we're calling it nowadays, earlier today that, going into this season, there were a lot of questions about the defensive end position in particular. And this answers your question for the next 3-4 years. I mean, Dylan Stewart is one of those guys. I mean, he's a national talent. He can step in and make an impact right away. As Mike brings up his film, he's just an unreal player. And then too, I think another thing with Dylan is like, he's another guy that will go actively recruit for you. I mean, yes. Dante has said he's been on board with all of that stuff. He's been very active in the group chats. Mm-hmm. And also, Mike, I mean, I think Dylan leaning towards South Carolina has been the worst kept secret in recruiting, I think. I mean, we saw the RPM go up to Ohio State a couple times there, but for me at least, it's felt like South Carolina has had the lead throughout. At times we were kind of checking ourselves to be like, is this real? Like we're hearing other stuff and whatnot, but I mean, it sure was the case. Dylan Stewart home in Columbia at South Carolina.
I want to get into some of the details about the recruiting process as far as Dylan Stewart is concerned, but just to take a look when we're watching his film here, just to give you an idea of what you're getting. Historically speaking, this is the third highest rated player that South Carolina has ever been able to land in the star system era. That first player, of course, being Jadeveon Clowney, and to say that he exceeded expectations is an understatement as far as being able to dominate the college level. So, right, we're not talking about professionally, even though he's been able to be in the NFL for a long time, right? Obviously, he's been dealing with injuries. But when I'm saying exceed expectations, I'm talking about from high school to college and being able to live up to that star that is next to you. So Clowney exceeded those expectations. Of course, he went on to be the first overall pick in 2014. So I say that. Number 2 is Jordan Birch.
Yeah.
I know it's real easy. To bash on Birch because he's no longer with South Carolina. I'm not going to do that. I covered the young man when he was at Hammond. I will say this, though. I thought his ranking was just a little bit higher than it should have been based on the competition they played against. And that's not to just crap on Skeeza because there's a lot of talent. I mean, Boogie Huntley, I mean, they've been able to produce a lot of talent, but I think it was just tricky based on his size. I think the expectations for him coming out of high school, and I still think he can have a phenomenal college career, and I still think he can do some good things at Oregon, and I wish him well. But I felt like he was just a little bit more overrated with that 5-star rating in comparison to probably what it should have been. And then you get to where we are today, and that's with Dylan Stewart. So I bring that up, though, because I have seen some people worried, like, is this going to be a Jordan Birch 2.0? The difference with Stewart, never mind the fact that I think he's just more, I think he's more athletic. Jordan Birch was a friggin' stud athlete. And I really don't want to make this a comparison between the two. But what I'm trying to get at is that there's things that I noticed in Stewart's game that are going to make you excited as a Gamecock fan. I think he is someone that, from an effort standpoint, you're not going to have to question that. Is he going to take plays? He's going to be ready to go. He is a type of guy who easily could be a top 10 pick when we're talking about him getting ready for the NFL when we get to that point. He's 6'5", 250 pounds. He's got arms that are the length of about, 33 and a half, 10 and a half inch And he is someone that flies. I think it's around 4'6" as a rising junior. That will be in the 4.5s. He is a guy that is going to be ready to go once he arrives at South Carolina. So from a talent standpoint, he's as good as it gets. He's as good as it gets. Some people have seen those numbers go up and down. He at one point was the number 1 rated player in the country. Now he's number 10. Don't get so caught up with that. Don't get so caught up with that. Bottom line is he had 16 sacks last year as a junior. Again, freak athlete. He's proved it on the field. And once again, Joe, you have another player from the DMV. You cannot overlook that so much, especially considering the fact that a couple months ago, who did you pick up in the DMV? Nicholas Harbor. All these things are connected. I'm not saying that Dylan Stewart wouldn't have come here if Harbor wasn't here already. But the point being is it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt when you are able to create a pipeline and be able to get already a 5-star caliber player here. And Stewart looks at this and says, man, why not me next?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the DMV to SC pipeline is wide open now at this point. And then you have another guy, like I said, Dylan Stewart, very active in recruiting. He'll be on your side as well. And another thing with Dylan Stewart, when you talk about the Jordan Birch comparisons, I mean, I think from Jordan Birch being around here, there was a lot more hype surrounding him. Nobody around here has really seen Dylan Stewart play. So I think once he gets here, I mean, fans are going to be really, really, really excited. He'll be one of those guys that you see in the spring game and just be like, wow, like, I mean, he's everything that we expected him to be and more. And also, too, I mean, when he was the number 1 player in the country, it wasn't a fluke, right? Like, I think he's very deserving of that title. He's got tremendous upside. I mean, the growth between his sophomore and junior season was very, very big. And again, he just keeps growing. He's going to add a lot more weight once he gets to South Carolina. And I mean, obviously he'll add some more weight his senior season as well. Just a stud, Mike. Very, very, very big get. And I mean, like I said, I think his commitment was exactly how he wanted it to be. No flashy lead up, no top 5s, no nothing like that. I mean, he dropped his finalists earlier, but I mean, nothing super crazy for Dylan. Just commit and boom. And finally he's home.
So as you see right here, and I always think these things are, pretty neat. At least it's a conversation talker. You're able to see on 3 who he compares to based on the size, the measurables, and who they feel like he could be kind of projected out to be, right? Just from where he is right now. So Jalen Phillips talked about the size, the speed. Phillips was a top 20 pick. And you see right there, just showing from a recruiting standpoint, where he was when he came out of high school, right? So kid was the number 1 player in the country for his class when he came out of high school back in, was it 2016? Was it 17?
Yeah.
17 class. So, something neat to be able to check. I know I just pulled this up. I want to pull it up again. The idea of when you look at South Carolina from a recruiting standpoint, Joe, right? We've talked about this from the trenches when we're talking about the offensive line, right? We've talked about the D line, and obviously this plays a part of that.
Yeah.
USC, it's not that they're just recruiting players for the sake of recruiting players, right? They're addressing needs. So I bring that up because, and I totally understand it, there is frustration with some of the fan base based on where South Carolina stands today with their running back room because of the phrase that we always use, the unproven depth at running back.
Yep.
Totally understand that. One thing, though, that I was thinking about the other day that we have not mentioned on this show. A lot of people want to get on Montario Hardesty because of that. One thing that gets overlooked, though, is South Carolina could have had Lavassier Carroll in that running back if it wasn't for an injury that he had sustained that ended his career, right? A medical condition. I should say medical condition, injury.
He was
so I bring that up because Hardesty played a big role with being able to get Carroll here. So there's obviously things that you can't control, whether you're a coach, whether you're a university, whether recruiting, regardless of your title. But I point out that one player in particular, because as we sit here today on August 1st, the narrative about the running back room, which, as you know, and many of our listeners know, I still feel like the offensive line is a bigger question mark than the running back room heading into the season. Not saying that the running back room doesn't have question marks, because it certainly does. But what would you say as of today, heading into fall camp, if Lavoisier Carroll was in that running back room? Would you feel great about the running back room? No, you probably maybe still have some question marks still, because you have a guy that hadn't played running back since he was in high school, since he was a defensive back at Georgia. However, he was one of the best running backs in his recruiting class when he came out that year. So I say that because I'm sure there would be a lot of people who feel like that running back room, they got question marks about it, would feel much better about that. Again, I just point that out because there are things you can't control. And however, USC's already been able to land DJ Braswell, who's on campus, right? He's going to be coming in, 4-star running back. They're in great position to be able to land Daniel Hill, who's making his commitment on August 23rd, the 4-star running back. So you look at that. You look at what they're doing at edge, a position that they need some depth at and need talent in. And you have Desmond Umeozulu already there. You're bringing in a guy like Dylan Stewart. Offensive line, even though it's a question mark, the young talent there for the next couple of years, they're addressing needs. They're bringing players in.
It's very easy to see, Mike, right? Like I said, this year they're not looking very deep at end. So what do? They go and get some defensive ends. And we were wondering about, I mean, obviously with the addition of Spencer Rattler and Juice Wells and all those guys really early, the question for Shane was then, how do you balance out, go and get recruits, guys from high school, and then go to the transfer portal? And I think this is kind of how you want to do it, right? This is straight out of the book of exactly how you want to do it. You want to go get the really, really, really talented guys with the big upside in positions of need, and then you fill in around it in the transfer portal. I think at the beginning of Shane's tenure, when he was landing, or when he landed, after he landed Spencer Rattler, people thought college athletics just in general in South Carolina would just be, kind of a free agency. Go into the portal and see if you can go get this big guy and then just keep building and building off of that. But, I mean, with all of the recruiting splashes that South Carolina is making right now, it makes you feel good about, both avenues being open for Shane.
So I want to show this real quick. You see South Carolina's top 4 prospects that they've been able to land. One thing that I don't think some people maybe are even aware of, I was listening today, our colleagues Wes Mitchell and Chris Clark, they did an emergency GC Live this afternoon, obviously, because of the news of Dylan Stewart this afternoon. And as I was listening, they had some tremendous guests on, but as I was listening, one of the guests they had was Charles Power, and Charles is the director of scouting and rankings when it comes to on-3 recruiting. So I was listening to him, and one thing that he mentioned, and I hadn't even noticed this, there are no 5-star offensive linemen currently in on-3's rankings with players. And the reason why that is the case is because a lot of these scouts, as he admitted, hadn't had the opportunity to really pay attention in person to see them play. So there is a possibility that Josiah Thompson, as you see, and I'll click this to make the screen a little bit bigger here, there's a possibility that Josiah could slide up and be a 5-star. Now, I don't want to get too crazy with the hypotheticals, the what ifs, and all that kind of stuff. The bottom line is this, as Charles mentioned. As far as Josiah is concerned, as far as any offensive lineman in the class of 2024 is concerned, they're going to have an opportunity to prove themselves this fall. They're going to have that opportunity. And the exact phrase Charles used was, he's in pole position to being bumped up to a 5-star when it's all said and done.
Yep.
So I point that out. Because as we go back to South Carolina's top 4 commits for the class of 2024, South Carolina being able to have 2 5-stars in the same recruiting class, let's just call for what it is. It's unheard of. But that is why you brought a guy in like Shane Beamer back in December of 2020, so that you can accomplish some of these first. And again, I don't want to get too crazy with it.
Mike, I'm glad you brought that up, because, I mean, Cam Pringle's another one of those guys. Don't sleep on Cam Pringle.
Another one.
He's one of the best offensive linemen in the state. I mean, so Cam Pringle's another guy. Watch for that too. I mean, Josiah Thompson could be, flirt with a 5-star plus kind of rating.
Because Joe, and I'm glad you brought Cam up. Cam at one point was the number one offensive tackle ranked in the country, and then Josiah moved up to that spot. I'm glad you brought up Cam.
Yeah, Cam he's one of the best offensive tackles in the country, one of the best offensive linemen in the state. So Cam could be another guy that slides into that 5-star. I don't necessarily think he'll get the 5-star plus, but Josiah possibly. I mean, you could see him, like you said, there are no 5-star offensive linemen. So if Josiah has a good fall, or Cam even too, you could see another jump of the two. It's kind of funny that these two are going back and forth, flipping, jumping each other in rankings, but it's a good thing.
But one thing too to point out, some people are aware of this that have been following recruiting for years. Some people who are new, whether it be to On3, whether it be to following recruiting rankings, we welcome you. We appreciate you having you on. There's only 32 spots when it comes to 5-star rankings, and those metrics are measured based on NFL potential. So that's why there's only 32 spots when you're talking about 5-stars. Only 32 players will be able to land a 5-star ranking next to their name. So I say that because, again, talking about hypotheticals here, don't want to go too crazy and create popsicle headaches, but you could have the possibility of a Cam Pringle or a Josiah Thompson being that 33rd, 34th, 35th, right? That guy right on the outside looking in. And from a metrics standpoint, yes, obviously from an optics standpoint, it looks great, right? When you look at the metrics, right? He has a 5-star next to his name. Okay, South Carolina has 2 5-stars, 3 5-stars, whatever the case may be. I get that. But just from a talent standpoint, just even flirting with the possibility of being a 5-star, that should get you geeked up. So the point being is this. We've already known this for weeks. We've known this for months, especially with these two. USC has 2 very, very talented offensive linemen coming in here. They already were able to pick up some very good offensive linemen from last recruiting cycling class. They were able to pick up a tremendous transfer in Nick Gargiulo from Gargiulo. I'm Italian. I shouldn't get that name wrong.
Oh, Mike.
Transferring in from Yale. They have been able to address an area that they needed to. But again, just talking about the hypotheticals, USC isn't a school. This is just the narrative, okay? The past narrative. USC isn't a school that should be landing 2 or 3 5-stars. And again, they have only one right now, right? But this is what's changing with Shane Beamer. The fact that we're sitting here on August 1st, right? And they already have a 5-star committed, and we're talking about the possibility of that when it's all said and done, there could be 2, there could be 3. Again, I don't want to get too crazy here, but it just goes to show you the trajectory of where things are going, the frustration that I totally understand from the month of July. But even though it didn't come out publicly of what was going on with some of these commitments, that didn't mean that there wasn't a lot going on behind the scenes. They kept staying persistent on guys like Dylan Stewart. They've been consistent on other players that we're going to be talking about in just a little bit. But I really wanted to focus in on that because, again, totally understand the frustration from the fan base. And I'm not saying it was everybody, right? I'm not saying it was everybody. But I think the people that were losing a little faith as far as recruiting, at least in the short term, they needed something like this today to be able to lift their spirits up. And I think it did just that. And the fact that it happens on August freaking 1st. Are you kidding me? You want to talk about feeling good about yourself heading into fall camp. My God, you could not have picked a better date.
Yeah, Mike, absolutely. I mean, it came a lot sooner than I expected, honestly. I mean, there wasn't that much time of, okay, like, is this going to pick up again? Like, it was 2 short weeks. So, I mean, there are fan bases around the country that have to wait a lot longer than that. So, I mean, I think 2 weeks, you got to be thanking your lucky stars. And like I said, August 1st, it's a great way to start off the month. You got camp coming up later this week. Pretty solid start to the month of August for South Carolina, that's for sure.
And there's no question about that. And again, just a reminder, the fact that this comes just days after South Carolina had their summer cookout, right? That is so important. That is so important to point to. And I want to bring this up too right here. As you see, as big as today was, 3 dates to keep in mind as we continue to head into August, right? I mean, this is just day one. 4-star wide receiver Jonathan Paylor, he is set to make his commitment on August 4th. Jalewis Solomon, 4-star athlete, he is set to make his commitment on August 5th. And 4-star running back Daniel Hill is set to make his commitment on August 23rd. I will say this, and I'll share some of the other stuff that we have as far as RPM and things that are being said and all that kind of stuff. As far as where South Carolina stands with those 3 players, I feel really good about 2 of them. Mm-hmm. And then there's one of them, I'd say, it's 50-50, but maybe it's leaning just a little bit out of their reach. With that being said, though, if they're able to pick up 2 of those 3 commitments, I mean, shoot, you want to talk about being able to start and again, Hill's later in the month, so if they're able to pick him up, but you want to talk about heading into a season with some momentum and being able to get this fan base to have some type of second win. I mean, people are going to be excited about football season regardless, but I think anytime you're able, and yes, Kevin, yes, 2026, should have thrown that one in there too. I should have preface it by saying this is just for the class of 2024, but I'm glad you brought that up about the young man, the quarterback for the class of 2026. But as far as the class of 24 goes, you want to feel good about where the program is headed in, and you're able to get a 5-star on August 1st. And if you're able, like I said, if you're able to pick up 2 of those 3 players this month, and then you head into that first game where there's going to be a lot of buzz, right? I mean, shoot, the storylines, the fact that you're playing a border state rival, you're playing on ABC, nationally televised game, college game day. It has all the hoopla there. But if you're able to get some momentum from a recruiting standpoint, and we'll talk about NIL in a little bit, all that other stuff that plays a big role with being able to build programs now, that helps that momentum. So again, the timing could not be any better because, shoot, if this doesn't happen until, say, mid-September or whatever, there could be some people in this fan base that just don't have that same juice. There's going to be people that fire up a football season regardless. But does that make sense, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we've seen this trend since Shane has gotten here. There's been a general uptick in momentum, and it hasn't really felt like they've lost any of it, right? I mean, Mike, it's just seemed like a general just uptick, like something good will happen, and then it just keeps happening. And then, I mean, obviously the way they finished out the end of last year, it's like, oh my gosh, like here they go again. And so it's just the general climbing of the college football mountain is kind of what we're seeing here from Shane and the rest of the South Carolina program. I mean, it doesn't come without work. I mean, they've certainly put it in, and the change in the culture, everyone's going to be talking about it. And I mean, we'll see South Carolina on a national media stage more than we ever have, really, or at least since the 2010s, 2012s. This team is going to get talked about a lot. And if they can keep building momentum in recruiting and then keep building momentum, obviously, with the play in this season, I mean, it's hard to put a ceiling on it, Mike. It really is.
So looking at that question below, before we head into our first commercial break from It's Me, you have 2 big offensive tackles coming in next year. Big Tree is a freshman. Does that make you want to go ahead and not redshirt Big Tree this year and let him get some serious playing time? The way I would answer that, and it's not even just about Big Tree, I would also say this about Marquis Anderson, is right now, heading into fall camp, in the back of your mind, you don't think that you're going to have to use a freshman. I wouldn't say think, but you're hoping that you don't have to get to that point. Now, obviously, if Tree comes out, if Marquis Anderson comes out and they just ball out to a point where you feel like it's going to put you in a position that is best for your team right now, then 1,000% you do that. And I do feel like at some point, just because of how thin USC's offensive line room is when you're talking about experience at this level and in the SEC, I'm not going to be shocked to see either Tree or Marquis Anderson get thrown into the mix at some point. And that valuable playing time will pay dividends when you're talking about next year's class, right? Because again, I keep saying this program is really 2 years away. And the reason I keep saying that is you can't just expect, and I think some people understand this, but let's just throw it out there. You can't just expect a bunch of freshmen to win you games in the SEC. That's just not going to be the case. It's just not. That's not to say that you might not have a freshman or two or three or four, even four sometimes, right? Be different makers. We saw that last year, right, with Nicky Minworry. We saw that with DQ Smith out there last year. We can keep going down the list. It happens. But that's not going to be a formula for success, especially in the SEC, for consistent success. So, again, I think going into fall camp, those freshmen, they're going to be working with the, maybe some will work with the twos, but the twos, the threes, and they're going to have to work their way up. I do feel like at some point South Carolina is going to have to go to a freshman. You pray to God that it's not because of injuries, but just based on the reality of where the O-line room is right now. But those are two talented freshmen that they already have on their roster this year.
Yeah, absolutely, and have gotten a lot bigger since they've gotten here as well. I mean, I remember seeing these guys in the move-in videos, and then also seeing them out at camp in June, and just the additions they've made. I mean, size-wise, it's already evident. So, I mean, you could definitely see some of those guys breaking into the rotation for sure.
Joe, we're going to hit an ad, and we're going to go to our good buddies first over at Liberty Tax.
Yeah, absolutely. Tax ID is that uncertain feeling you get right before doing your taxes, but you don't have to go through it alone. The tax team at Liberty Tax in Irmo, Lexington, and Columbia will walk you through the process, clear up any confusion, and guarantee you'll get the biggest possible refund or your money back. It's tax time. If you're in a hurry for your refund, call the tax team at Liberty Tax. Fast, accurate, and guaranteed. On the other hand, if you think you might be owing Uncle Sam, talk to the Liberty Tax team to make sure you're not paying more than you should owe. They'll find every possible deduction for you. Locally owned and operated, staffed by tax professionals from your neighborhood. Open 9 to 9 on weekdays and 9 to 5 on Saturdays with multiple service options. Start through Liberty Tax mobile app or through their desktop portal. Make an appointment or just walk in. Give a call to upload your tax documents, and when you come in, your return will be ready to review and sign. Give them a call over at their phone number, 803-462-5576. Once again, call them at 803-462-5576 for all of your tax needs.
Today's show is also brought to you by our good friend Clint Hammond at the Movement Mortgage Network. Clint has been a longtime sponsor of Gamecock Central, as well as every one of these GC Live programs. So whether you're watching this show, whether you're watching Wes and Chris when they come on, he is the number one sponsor for us. He always is. You see his sponsorship on top of our show right now. He's always up there. He has helped so many people throughout the Midlands. He helped our very own Wes Mitchell out when it came time to being able to buy a home. He also helped out former Gamecock quarterback and captain Perry Orth. Right now, as many of you know, if you're trying to buy a home, it is not the easiest of process to do. Clint can make that process a hell of a lot easier for you. So give him a call, 803-771-6933. Also want to quick plug here, and we'll get into it a little bit more. It's talking about the Gamecock Central kickoff party at Stale Hands Brewing. That is on August 19th, and this year, the foundation that is going to get supported is going to be the Beamer Family Foundation. So head on over. It is an outstanding event. So many Gamecocks have shown up, whether it be Shane Beamer, we had Lamont Parrott. I mean, there's been so many people that have come out to this before. Players as well. G.G. Jackson came out last year. Gamecock football players came out. And, of course, Patrick Davis and his Midnight Choir will be there as well performing. And another reason why you should go out there is because over the weekend, the Garnet Trust announced that they have partnered up with Steel Hands Brewing to launch a NIL beer. An NIL beer, it is called Sandstorm Game Day Lager. I had an opportunity to have it over the weekend at the opening of CB18, which raised, I think it was $10,000. I don't know if that's officially been out there yet, but there you go. $10,000 for the Hayden Hurst Family Foundation in their fight against mental health. And this beer is going to be very popular. Very popular. The exact percentage, because I know that's been out there, It has not been released yet. If I had to take a guess, just based on what is out there with other beers from an NIL standpoint, you talk about Cincinnati, Iowa, it's probably going to be between that 10 and 20% mark. And there's factors that are a hell of a lot over my head that I don't friggin' know when it comes to, why certain things have to be this or that. But that would be my guess. But that number should be coming out soon. But again, when you buy that, a percentage will be going back to the Garnet Trust directly to be able to help NIL. So if you like drinking beer, shoot. And especially for college kids. Joe, I know I was telling you about this project for weeks. And I remember talking with Jeremy Smith, who's done an outstanding job with the Garnet Trust, especially trying to get it to a point where, and I'm going to answer Tyler's question, talking about NIL, but getting it to a point where USC can improve, number one, but be competitive against some of these other schools. And this was an idea that he's had, and he's done an outstanding job of making it happen. It seems like it is so simple of a concept. When you're talking about trying to raise money for NIL, the challenging part is sustainability. So to be able to have this isn't necessarily saying each year, because you're going to have to do this part regardless.
Yep.
Hey, donate. Being able to do something like this, you're going to be able to raise funds. So massive announcement from this past weekend. And August 19th, Steel Hands, that's when it's going to become available. Yep. And it's going to be distributed, from my understanding, throughout the state, parts of North Carolina, wherever Steel Hands beer is distributed. And there's also going to be some restaurants and bars that are already reaching out, wanting to put it in their restaurant.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike kind of previewed the little surprise to me pretty early, and then he gave me the permission to tell all my buddies. So now all my buddies are itching for a case. Unfortunately for them, they're waiting until August 19th, but we will see what we can do. But yeah, big announcement for Garnet Trust. I think it's really exciting. As you saw, some of you may have seen, West Virginia debuted with their own Mountaineer Ale. So, I mean, it's crazy to think that NIL collectives are coming out with beers and whatnot, but here we are. I mean, we're at that stage in the game, and I'm very, very happy for Garnet Trust, and also Steel Hands, a really good friend of ours as well. The can's super sweet. I definitely.
So this is the back of it, Joe. I posted this yesterday because some people didn't have an opportunity to at least see the back of the can.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, the front of it looks great, but the back, that QR code, I mean, that's a game changer.
Website. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, doing as much with the can as you possibly can. So it's I love it. The design's awesome. Like you said, the steel hand with the rally towel is pretty good.
No, it's great. And again, this beer will come out. It will officially launch on August 19th. Cameron, and I want to make sure I'm saying this right based on what was relayed to me. Because of laws in South Carolina, I don't think Steel Hands is able to actually sell it online. Now, what you can do is, depending on a retail store, so, if there's a certain area that gets the beer, you can order it to that area, and then you can pick up, right? You can pick up. Probably not, Matthew. Not 100% sure. That question's well above my head, but I'll see if I can ask for you. But again, being able to have this, it's a game changer. It's a game changer. Cox by 90, as many people know him by his social media name, Jeff O'Hara. He's a 2010 graduate at the University of South Carolina. The job they did with the bar, I can tell you right now, there are so many projects lined up involving that bar that will make an impact with the Garnet Trust. So, and Matthew, you're good. I'm sure you're not the only one that is thinking that. I wish I could give you a better answer, but yeah, again, August 19th. Right now, that beer's gone. They're not selling it anywhere because the party, they went through four barrels of it. I guess it's not full keg, so they call them barrels. 4 barrels of it. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. And I want to go back to that NIL question, but KC says, just got here. What's up, fellas? Look forward to the conversation every week. Big day in Gamecock country. No question about it. I want to go back, though, to Tyler. Sticking with NIL here. Tyler says, how can our NIL situation not be better than North Carolina State? We need the missile, a.k.a. Baylor. I don't know the exact numbers as far as North Carolina State is concerned. I could tell you where South Carolina is without giving out those numbers, but certainly they are behind some other programs out there. With that being said, bottom line is more people need to donate. I mean, there's no other way to put it. And I think we had a rant about this maybe 2 weeks ago, Joe, maybe last week, can't remember.
Yeah.
And that rant was, and I'm not saying this directly at you, Tyler, but the people that get upset when a player doesn't go to a school and they feel like it's because of NIL, or they find out that NIL played a big role. If they're not making a donation, and again, everyone's financial situation is different. I'm not here to tell you what to do with your money, but the point being, as a whole, there just hasn't been enough donations, at least leading up to this point, to put South Carolina in that position to be able to have that success. We can talk about the Park Ave project, right? And I know they're working with Carolina Rise now, so it's not like I'm trying to take a direct shot against them. But the point being is, at least looking at the past, that's just not going to be sustainable. When you're talking about collectives, that's not going to be something that's going to be able to help South Carolina consistently. You're going to need to have a collective that has the money there that can be able to help out not just your top tier guys, not just being able to go out and get the Beats by Dre ad or whatever the endorsement, whatever the case may be. You need to be able to have things that are going to be sustainable. So that's why Garnet Trust has really been able to focus on those efforts. Again, Jeremy Smith has done an outstanding job in the growth of Garnet Trust. I think it's only going to take off very, very soon. But being able to have the backing, that's something that we didn't talk about yet. The backing of the university from this past weekend, it needed to be said because there's so many schools out there that have a collective. And this isn't, bottom line is Carolina Rise, Garnet Trust, they all are doing things to help student athletes. But being able to have the university at least put support behind one was massive. It's massive when you have your football coach, right? Don Staley, everyone knows who Don is in the state, but when you have the football coach or a Don Staley or anyone come out there and say, hey, we need your support, it changes the game. And the amount of donations that have took place since last Thursday, it's incredible. And they need to continue to happen. So as far as NIL is concerned, USC is getting into a position now where they're going to be able to compete. And they're going to be able to hopefully land some of these kids if it comes down to NIL playing a role. But they need to have the funds there. It's tough to go up against some of these schools if they have more money. And even if they do have more money, you also got to talk internally to yourself from a business standpoint. Are you going to be able to get the most out of this investment, right? You can't be just throwing numbers around like it's monopoly money. So I think South Carolina, they're juggling that right now, while also being able to bring in those donations. And again, talking about these things like the beer and some of these other projects that are in the pipeline right now for Garnet Trust, it's going to help tremendously with getting South Carolina in a position to be able to compete against some of these other schools when we're talking about NIL.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the more you can do, the better. Garnet Trust being announced by the university is huge. It makes things easy for people realizing which collective is endorsed by the university. So big things happening over at Garnet Trust. Go support as much as you can.
I'm going to keep this going with Tyler. And Tyler, you're asking awesome questions because you're not the only one that has brought this up. At the CB18 opening, at the opening this past week, and there were people who were asking similar questions to you. So I think it's good. We have a pretty good audience tonight because I'm sure there's other people out there that are thinking the same thing. And Tyler says, why do you think that? Why is our fan base not buying in like you'd think they would? What do you think is holding people back? I'm a Carolina Rise member, and I'm going to start donating to the Garnet Trust as well. But this fan base needs to buy in, love what y'all do. Appreciate that. And again, Carolina Rise, Garnet Trust, I think they're doing an outstanding job, too, of what they're doing. I'm never going to sit here and bash that's not what this is about.
Yeah.
Obviously, the bottom line is at the end of the day, the goal is to be able to have NIL money to be able to support the Gamecock student athletes first and foremost. And they do a tremendous job over there as well. I think the big thing is, Tyler, is I think two things. I think just the reality is, number one, and I know people don't want to hear this from a Yankee, but at the end of the day, I'm living down here too. You know, my paychecks are from South Carolina, so I'm right there with you, is that when you're talking about from a financial standpoint, you look at the minimum wage in this state, right? I mean, from a financial standpoint, just the reality. People don't want to talk about this. The money isn't the same here in comparison to some other states. That's just the reality. Now, with that being said, that doesn't mean South Carolina can't compete because, right, you think of some other states that from a financial standpoint could be similar to South Carolina, whatever the case is, right? Mississippi, like you think of these other states and they're still able to find ways. I think it's just being able to educate the fan base first and foremost, because again, we think about the big time donors and that's awesome. And they do a tremendous job, but you need the little guys. You need the people that might not necessarily have the millions and millions of dollars. And because of that, they want to know, rightfully so, where their money's going, how their money is being spent. Mm-hmm. And I totally understand that. So I think, and I've had conversations with Jeremy Smith about this, and he has some great ideas to be able to hopefully close that gap and build that connection between the fan base and the collective. I know that on 107.5 The Game, the Garnet Trust Hour, that plays a role on Tuesdays and Thursdays to be able to connect the fan base with the collective to hopefully educate a little bit. There's also some interviews in there with student athletes so they can get paid. But I think the biggest thing right now is building that trust and educating the fan base so they feel like, and they know truthfully where that money is going, how it's being spent. I think it's going to improve because, again, going back to this past week, having that message come from the university was massive. It was massive. Now, does that solve all the problems? Certainly not. But I think just continuing to educate the fan base. There were certainly some obstacles early on, right? You think of the Park Ave launch, and then they had to come back because there were certain things that, based on the previous rules of NIL, Park Ave had to take a step back and they had to change their model up a little bit. And that wasn't any fault of their own. That was just because of the rules getting changed a little bit, getting tweaked a little bit. And I think that also created a disconnect maybe with the fan base and just the idea of NIL. So again, I think this will help smooth things out a little bit. And if the little guy can give a couple bucks a month, it doesn't even have to be the hundreds and, $100 a month, whatever. You're thinking just $10 a month. You're thinking just the HBO subscription, right? Those little things add up. So that's what I would say about that. And I hope that answered your question, Tyler. I appreciate you asking me that one. CC Garland says, is the university not promoting? Are they able to promote the Garnet Trust? They are, CC. So this past week, if you missed it or anyone missed it, the University of South Carolina, they officially announced that Garnet Trust is their official collective of the university. And that was massive because leading up to that point, they had not done that. And there were other universities that had already done that. So that plays a role. I say small role. I don't think it plays a small role. That plays a role. So being able to educate people on that and being able to know that the university has their backing on a collective, in this case, the Garnet Trust, certainly helps. Big Red, good to see you. Is it mostly alumni donating or is it spread out amongst general fans as well? I don't know exactly who's donating because, I don't see those numbers. But I think it's alumni. I think it's, fans that might not have even gone to USC, right? They may have gone to a smaller college. They may just, for whatever reason, their family, they're Gamecock fans. So naturally they become Gamecock fans. So you have it all spread out. Bake SC803 says, if I donate to Garnet Trust, does that include a subscription to your work? That doesn't. I know that with Gamecock Central playing a big role with at least the launch of Garnet Trust, that you try to find ways. There's so many rules and what you're able to get and this and that. I know Shoe's been trying to figure out different things, but it doesn't. However, there are a lot of things that the Garnet Trust is doing when it comes to interviews, and fans are able to get that. Now, you might be able to get exclusive content on Gamecock Central, but there's also been talks about trying to find ways to give Garnet Trust donors access to some of this content, whether it be videos, whether it be written content, where you don't have to be a subscriber to Gamecock Central or the Big Spur, right? And that's something else I want to mention. As just being an outsider, and I'm not just saying this because I work at Gamecock Central. I would have said this regardless if I wasn't down here. I feel like there's a disconnect because of the loyalty there is to Gamecock Central and the loyalty that there is to the Big Spur, right? And it's kind of become one of these things where it's like, well, if I support this, that means I have to support this collective. Bottom line is this: none of that really matters. It really doesn't matter. All that matters is being able to generate money to support the Gamecock student athletes. I mean, we can make up a name for something. It really doesn't matter. You could have had a third party collective that made something up. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the goal remains the same. So I bring that up just because it's not just the Gamecock Central thing. Tyler says, do we have a good flow of big donations for NIL, or is that what is lacking more than your average donors? So I can tell you, and I won't throw out the exact number because it's not my place to say. Gamecock Central is at least heading into the month of July. They were halfway to where they wanted to be for the year. And talking to Jeremy Smith, he feels good that they're going to be able to hit that mark. And that was before the announcement of this NIL beer. So I bring that up because there's been some big donations in certainly the first 2 years. And I know Garnet Trust has been around longer than that, but I'm talking about this being the true first year. These first 2 years are going to be the trickiest because you're trying to create a foundation and some sustainability so that you don't have to keep going out and begging the big time donors to donate. So you get to a point where you have that sustainability, but on top of that, you're going to be able to generate some additional funds through these other projects, and it's going to be able to help South Carolina to a point where if they get those big donations, now that pot's just getting bigger. So they have a target goal in mind, but the goal is in 2 years to be able to blow that out of the water because you're able to create that foundation right now. Big Red, our financial planners, a part of the trust trying to help players in the NIL deal. Would that be up to the player? Or well, I'll say this. Jeremy Smith, who's been taking on the responsibility of, and intern Joe, appreciate you popping this up, trying to do all this Garnet Trust talk right now. Jeremy Smith has a planning background. So he understands this stuff friggin'. I mean, just talking to the guy, he's so friggin' good. And another thing I want to bring up, this is his full-time job. So yes, there is money going into it. Going back, I think it's like 90 and 10, right? 90% goes back to the student athletes, 10% goes back to making sure you're paying the employees of Garnet Trust and making sure maintenance for the website, all that. I'd rather have someone working full-time than part-time. The reason I say that is when you have someone that's working full-time like Jeremy is, he's able to commit all of his efforts to the Garnet Trust. And what he's been able to do since moving up his whole family from Florida, relocating him. I mean, he grew up in this area. He's back here, but he's took on the responsibility of helping Garnet Trust get to a level that people don't even think it could get to. That's the vision that he has. So he's dedicated to the Garnet Trust. He has these ideas, what they're going to try to do to be able to get them to that point. As far as working with the individual players, there are different steps in place to be able to also educate these players, these student athletes, so that before they are able to collect some of their NIL money, processes of going through videos to be able to make sure they understand taxes and just understanding all these things that when you're 18, 19 years old, you don't think about because you're not used to seeing all this money. And it doesn't even have to be the Juice Wells or the Spencer Rattlers of the world. It's just being able to have some type of money where you have to pay taxes and deal with all that kind of stuff. So Jeremy has done an outstanding job. Sorry, I'm kind of. I know to turn into an NIL
we,
talk.
we love the NIL questions. Thank you guys for bringing them on.
But it's important. But it's important.
Yeah, exactly. There's plenty of them out there. Obviously with the recent shift and what South Carolina's doing with Garnet Trust and also the Spirits, it gets a little confusing. So it is all good. Mike's just a little bit more qualified to talk about it than I am, so I figured Mike could handle all of it. But
I've been able to work closely with Jeremy over the last couple of months and just get educated more on it, because look, this is still new to all of us. And as I've said many times before in other programs, and I think I've said it on this show as well in the past, we have hardly even scratched the surface of what NIL ultimately means for collegiate athletics. So if you're not a fan of it, I totally understand. I totally understand that Matthew brings up, got to get the old folks on board. Most of the money in our state / fandom is older folks. They hate the distrust technology. And again, it's not to just pick on,
same issue,
like you said, as you phrased it, Matthew, the old folks. I think it's being able to educate everybody, because as I mentioned, I keep using the little guy, the people that are coming out of college, right? And we got student loans. I totally understand that. But think about that. Even if someone's donating $5 a month, and again, I'm not here to tell you what to do with your money, but just think about the difference that makes. That's why when you think about this Sandstorm beer, Little Johnny, right? I say Little Johnny. Probably shouldn't say Little Johnny, because Little Johnny has to be 21 at least, right? Johnny goes out to 5 Points and he's buying a couple beers each week. Well, that could be $10 right there that is going back to support Garnet Trust. You see what I mean? So when I'm talking about the little guy being able to donate that money, or in this case, the NIL with the beer, every dollar adds up, right? Every dollar adds up. And that's what South Carolina is hoping is going to be able to help them get to a position that they can compete against some of these other guys. And, we talked about those players in the dates coming up, Joe.
Yeah.
I really like where South Carolina stands, as I mentioned, with two of them. I will show you who those two are. We'll bring that up. And I know we've had a lot of NIL talk here. As Tyler says, do we have a good flow of big donors? I'm going through some of the questions here. It's me. It would be kind of cool to have.
My bad.
We'll get back to that one. It'd be kind of cool to have the option to mark if your NIL gift could go to the quarterback recruiting or linebacker recruiting or a specific player like Mo Kaba or DQ Smith. That's happened. That's happened at other schools. I don't think it's too far-fetched to believe that it couldn't happen here. Certainly one thing you worry about is, and just bringing up an example because it's making me think about this, it's me, is that, all right, naturally you think about the quarterback position, right? You don't want all the money just to go to the quarterback. In this case, it's real easy because we'll pick on Spencer because Spencer's doing very well and he's earned every penny he's getting right now.
Today too.
But you think about all that money going in there, it's like, well, what about the offensive line? What about this? So I know with at least Garnet Trust, the idea is, yeah, obviously you're going to take care of the top guys. There's no question about that. But Garnet Trust, and it's not just football either. Basketball, soccer, all the sports. Again, Jeremy is doing an outstanding job of spreading the wealth around, and those players that hop on those segments on 107.5 The Game on Tuesdays and Thursdays, it hasn't just been football players, and they're getting paid. And I know that the women's soccer coach, Shelly Smith, I know men's soccer, Tony, and you go down the list, women's basketball, everyone's appreciative. Men's basketball as well with Lamont Paris. I do want to mention, though, I know we ranted for hours here, felt like, Joe, about NIL, but I think it's important because no one's really talked about it. You know what I mean? Like, no one has really talked about some of these questions that so many of you have. And shoot, maybe I will write something up and I'll make it free so that everyone can see, and hopefully it'll help educate people a little bit more on it. But I want to bring up just some of the players real quickly that we've been talking about here.
Yeah. And we've had this question a couple times. Could this Dylan Stewart commitment help with the Paler decision?
Can't hurt, right? Can't hurt.
No. And he's actively recruiting, like we've been saying. I mean, we've heard from Dante and just kind of all those guys that Dylan's been very involved in the group chat. It's not like one of those guys that just wants to show up and play ball. No, he's in it. I mean, he's kind of like a Pup Howard, just not as vocal on social media. Dylan, I think we could see him start to be. Saw that with a couple guys too. Once they committed, they started, tweeting at guys and whatnot. Mazio Bennett, one of those guys. So I think, adding Dylan definitely helps. I mean, just because he's another guy that, helps build momentum towards your program. And then obviously what he can do as a recruiter in a class that's basically recruiting itself.
No question. As you see right here, and Tyler, I appreciate it. Buddy, come back anytime to these shows and weigh in. Can't wait to get the season rolling. We could actually talk some X's and O's and everything else in there, but I might go back and actually cut up some of the stuff that Tyler asked today and go back, transcribe some of the things I said, put it more in a cohesive manner, written out, and get that out to this fan base. Because, again, a lot of the things you asked, Tyler, you are not alone, buddy. You are not alone. There are a lot of people that are thinking a lot of things that you just mentioned. I'm sure there's some people still that have questions. And, again, at a later time, I would love to be able to get with Jeremy and be able to answer. I mean, that might be something that we do next. I don't know if we do it next week. I mean, it would have been better to do this in the off season, but and tonight's news obviously kind of derailed everything, going a little bit longer than usual here. But you know what? It's a big day. But we will get Jeremy and we'll talk about NIL, try to answer some of those questions for you guys, because again, I think a lot of people have those questions. But he says, Tyler, that is, thanks for answering all of our questions, fellas. We've got one hell of a fan base, and we've got money. More people just need to know, so I know we'll get where we need to be. No question about it. You see, though, Julius Solomon, it really has been a roller coaster, at least from an RPM standpoint.
Oh, yeah.
But if you've been paying attention to what Chris and Wes have been saying on the Insider Forum, you know that South Carolina, especially over, I'd say, the last month or so, have done a tremendous job of being able to come on strong towards the end of his recruiting process, as he is set to make his commitment later on this weekend. An athlete like him, a defensive back, you see that athlete title, being able to play defensive back at South Carolina. I mean, you just look at his measurements, right? 6 feet, making sure I'm getting old here, 185. That screen's a little bit smaller there, intern Joe. Gotta squint a little bit. Getting old. I have a birthday later this week, so I'm getting old, Joe. But that's someone, when you look at his metrics, being able to work with a guy like Torian Gray, are you kidding me? So again, Solomon will be making his commitment August 5th. Before that, though, and I know a lot of people are hoping that this young man commits to South Carolina, and that's Jonathan Paler. He's set to make his commitment on August 4th. You see right there from the On3 recruiting prediction machine, South Carolina still with the slight edge, but those numbers, man, USC, they really had a lead, a major league for a while. But again, as we talked about last week, Paler didn't go to the cookout this week for South Carolina. Instead, on that same date, he decides to go to North Carolina State. The Wolfpack have come on strong with the recruitment of Paler as of late. And I would say right now, if I had to put my money on it, I would say that he's leaning towards NC State. However, and as you brought up, Joe, does the decision by Dylan Stewart today at all influence him, right?
Yeah.
Even if it just moves the needle a little bit, if he is thinking about going to NC State, I think it can't hurt. It can never hurt.
Yeah, and while we're doing the roundup, Big Red asks any news on Hill, and Big Red, we'll get to your question about having somebody from Garnet Trust. Mike, would that be kind of in the plans? Could we do something like that?
As far as where is
having somebody from Garnet Trust on?
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely.
We'll definitely do that.
I think we could do that. We could do that either next week or the week after.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's going to be so much to talk about these next couple of weeks during training camp, but I think we can get a segment in there, even if it's just half hour. Yeah. We could definitely do that. But throwing out Daniel Hill here, I really like where South Carolina stands with him. I really, really like. What I can tell you is, well, we all know he's going to make his commitment. At least it is scheduled that he will make his commitment on August 23rd. That South Carolina has just continued to be in communication with him, continue to be in communication to him with the point where he's been able to build some really, really, really strong relationships with a lot of the players that are part of the 2024 class. So again, we're talking about the impact when you have a 5-star player like Dylan Stewart commit today. I can tell you this is something that I do know, that Dylan Stewart and Daniel Hill spent a lot of time together during their official visit back in June. I know that there was a trip over to Bolero. I know that some of the players hopped around, went to different places afterwards. They were hanging out, it's from my understanding, for a good portion of the evening. I think Xavier Leggett was one of their hosts. And I say one of their hosts because, or at least he was in the mix with them. And again, I don't know the exact, but my point being is shout outs to Xavier Leggett if they were able to land Dylan Hill and Dylan Stewart, because Leggett was in the fold for that. He was in the mix. But that one is going to be on August 23rd. Kind of got off track a little bit, but I wouldn't even say off track. And Kevin says, you think it'd help Elijah Griffin? Again, can't hurt. Always helps. Always helps. Joe, as we move things along, we kind of wrap things up here because we spent some time on NIL. And again, I think that needed to be said. I think it needed to be said tonight.
Yeah.
What are you looking forward to? We want to say something beforehand?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say we'll get more into the Garnet Trust. We'll have an interview and go over, because it is a super confusing time for South Carolina fans in terms of that front. So good to get that out and about.
Shoot, Tyler, I wish we had you at the event this past weekend. Now, granted, and this is where it confused some people, but I'll put it just in terms which just real simple to people. You have the Garnet Trust and you have the Garnet Trust Foundation. Garnet Trust Foundation helps to make sure that you can continue to make sure you check off boxes where people can make donations and the organization is considered a 501c, and they have that, and you can you have your write-offs and all that, right? So Jeremy, again, doing things the right way, because there have been other collectives that have already got shut down because they're not doing the charitable side of it, making sure that they're donating portions back to the foundational side of it so that people can donate directly and still be able to use their write-offs. This past week in Hayden Hurst, $10,000 was raised for the Hayden Hurst Foundation. There was also some additional money raised, though, that is going to the Garnet Trust. So just an outstanding job all the way around by Jeremy and the Garnet Trust team. Really. And again, shout out to Jeff O'Hara, a.k.a. Cox by 90, him and Steve Tannehill for the opening of their bar. I know, Joe, you were there. You had a good time, right?
Great time. I'm excited to see what Jeff can do, or what they're doing to Breakers. I had a couple buddies stop by over the weekend and loved it. So I'm glad to see 5 points, maybe seeing a resurgence here. I wouldn't so far as call it back, but we're getting there. We're getting there.
You got a mix.
Yeah.
Right. Real quick before we wrap things up, you get a mix. Breakers Live is still there. You still have that college feel for it. So if you're a college student, you want to head on down there, or you're someone that's maybe like, I don't know, 23 years old, that's your spot, head there. However, the CB18 side, it's a mixture, right? If you've ever been to like a Village Idiot, I mean, that's the best way to describe it. But it's that sports bar. It's right on the corner. You have a blend of both. And I say both because that's the feel I had yesterday. The wings are outstanding. I had them yesterday. They got this like lemon pepper kick to them. Even if you get like buffalo, outstanding. But I bring all that up because a lot of the stuff that Jeff has planned is going to support Garnet Trust, him and Steve.
Yeah.
Joe, as we wrap things up here, though, we appreciate everyone tuning in. We got a big audience tonight, so we appreciate everyone that's been watching us. What are you most looking forward to, whether it be Media Day on Thursday, the players and coach, or the players everyone's reporting on Thursday. So we'll hear from the players. We'll hear from the coaches. Shane Beamer will have his introductory press conference, but then we'll hear from offensive and defensive players as well as positional coaches. And then on Friday, the team will have their first practice. It is open to the media for the first 7 periods. So Gamecock Central will have sights and sounds for you. So be sure to check that out on Friday morning. Is there anything in particular, though, you're looking forward to on one of those 2 days?
Yeah, just ready to hear what these guys have going through their heads, kind of going into it, seeing if they're ready to be, locked in, ready for fall camp. I'm sure these guys are just chomping at the bit. So, now it's your last chance to, say what you got to say before the real work starts. So I'm excited to hear what everyone has to say before going into camp. And then obviously camp starts and football's here. And then I'm headed home to South Bend for a week. And then when I get back, kickoff party. It's going to be fun.
What I'm looking forward to the most is being able to hear from Nicholas Harbor, right? Hear from a guy like that. Hear from a guy like Braswell, because that's what we were expecting to hear. I believe all the players will be made available again as they have been the last couple of years. COVID, obviously, things were different. They had the tables like it was a science fair, like a 5th grade science fair, and all the players were kind of scattered out. I don't know if that will be the exact format. I kind of hope it is. Selfishly, from a media standpoint, it's real easy. Just hop around. But that's obviously one of the neat things that Beamer does in comparison to the Will Muschamp era, which is a Saban rule. Freshmen don't speak to the media, is being able to hear from those freshmen because people want to hear from Harbor. People want to hear from Braswell, right? He's coming in and, man, you have an opportunity to earn some serious playing time right away just because there is so much uncertainty with this running back room. I'm interested to hear from DeCarrion Joyner. I'm interested to see DeCarrion Joyner and how much muscle he's put on since the last time we saw him back in April. And he's obviously heading into what feels like his 30th year of college football, but this will be the last year, right? He doesn't have any more eligibility left after this year. What it's kind of been like juggling everything as a dad as well, right? So I know he's fired up. I'm excited, though, to see the first practice. I mean, we're going to post the clips because there's 7 periods. So usually by the 7th period, you're going to be able to see some throwing period, whether it be throwing on air, right? Stuff like that. Everyone's going to lose their mind after the first completion to Harbor. I can already see it. But I am interested to see Harbor, even if it's on air, just running.
Just
running on air.
Yeah.
With that helmet
absolutely.
on, with that Gamecock helmet on.
Yeah. And again, like I've been talking about this like all summer. I've just been hearing it, how fast he is. Number one, from media days, I'm excited to get everyone else's take on that and see how everyone else feels about that, as well as, just getting to see it up close, just see him run a little bit, like see, is he really that fast? I'm sure it's probably faster than we think, Mike.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see him out there. And the other thing, too, talk about size, how much bigger Harbor is. Obviously, we've kind of speculated since the day he committed, but the fact that we saw that number, and I think it's is it 250 now? I got to remember. He's put on some serious muscle since getting to work with Luke Day. So it's going to be exciting just to see what he looks like out there. And Tyler mentions, God, if we can put together a good offensive line with all these new additions and veterans, this offense could be special. I still think DK or Mario Anderson will shore up the backfield. Yeah, Mario Anderson's another player that shouldn't be slept on. I think he's going to, again, Juju, Mario, DK, and then you throw Braswell in there. I think the running back room is going to be fine. I really do. This isn't, and I've said this before, this isn't the 80s. This isn't the 90s. You don't need a running back that's going to be touching the ball 30-plus times a game. Yeah. You just need someone that's going to be able to protect the damn football, right? Protect the damn football and be able to get you positive yardage. But like Tyler said, and as we've said multiple times, going back to, I think following the Gator Bowl, offensive line needs to come together quickly. And that was one thing, having an opportunity to interview Lonnie Teasley last week following the Birdies with Beamer golf outing. He mentioned that. He's like, the biggest thing we need to do is we need to get on the same page as quickly as possible. We're going to have guys play multiple positions in camp because we want to really stretch them out because we really, really, really need to find the 5 best players. 5 best players, right? Does that mean Gargiulo hops around a little bit? He's played practically every position in college. He has experience. So, if they need him to move out to tackle because of injuries to start the year, I wouldn't be shocked to see that. I think they're going to do whatever they can if a freshman starts, whether it be Marquis Anderson, whether it be Oluwatosin Babalade, that could happen too. I think that is the biggest question mark, and we are going to be talking about that probably ad nauseum leading up to week 1, which starting tomorrow, we are officially a month away until the first game.
Yeah. 2 quick questions before we go. Big Red, are the practices open to the public or just the media? Just the media for now, I believe. I haven't heard anything about it being open to the public yet. And then Blake, I see if I sign up for GC, does it run a year from the day I sign up or till December 31st? I believe if you buy the yearly, it runs since the day you signed up to the day you signed up.
Yeah, so to answer Big Red's question, unfortunately, there's no practices that are open to the public. I believe there are 4 practices that are opened to media, but those practices that are open to media, they are typically, 5 or 6 periods. I think the first one will be 7 periods, so you get to see the stretch period. Woohoo! All kidding aside, we will have sights and sounds on all 4 of those, practices, and if there's a 5th one thrown in there, yes. Bake SC803 mentioned asking about the subscription. Unless it specifically says 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, whatever, if it's a year, it is 1 full year. It's not just the calendar year. It is 1 full year in the sense of 12 months. So hopefully that helps with that question. Champ says Mario Anderson will be interesting to watch. I think Mario's going to surprise some people.
I agree. DJ Twitty as well.
Twitty had a really good spring game. And I know we haven't mentioned Twitty that much. Twitty had a really good spring game.
Twitty's the guy that they're going to plug in if somebody goes down or something like that. And I mean, his name and everything about him screams SEC running back to me. So I don't know. Watch out for DJ Twitty if something happens. I know he's not going to be in the mix right away, but again, if something happens, DJ Twitty's that next guy out.
And Big Red, Knox will be interesting in a Gamecock helmet and how he helps both the pass and the run. No,
dynamic player, man.
Big Red, I'm glad you brought that up. And I'm going to pick on Knox here a little bit. I believe it was the first play of the spring game. It was a screen pass, or maybe the second play, one of the first 2 plays of the game. And he just whiffed on a blocking assignment. Whiffed. Later on, though, he had a big catch that drive. Later on, though, he made some big-time blocks. Big-time blocks. So I bring that up because seeing the way he responded in that moment and showed what he's capable of doing from a blocking standpoint, and I know this for a fact, even though he's a tight end, he's going to be getting some work with Justin Stepp. Stepp takes tremendous pride when it comes to blocking. Tremendous pride with stock blocking. So that is something I'm sure Knox will do what he can to make sure that he makes Stepp proud, as well as his own positional coach, Jody Wright. But man, yeah, Knox is going to be a fun player to watch. What a night. What a night, though. Again, if you've missed any of our show today, the big story of the whole day, 5-star plus, which means every recruiting site there is, the major 4, have rated him 5 stars. Dylan Stewart, the edge from DC, has committed to South Carolina, the 3rd top player that South Carolina has ever landed since the star system went in place. A massive, massive day for Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks. If you missed any of our show, though, head on back. You can watch it in its entirety on the Gamecock Central YouTube page or wherever you listen to podcasts as well. And again, we hit on everything that you could talk about tonight. We talked about Dylan Stewart. We talked about the players you should keep an eye on as far as the class of 2024 is concerned. There could be another one this weekend for the class of 26. We also talked a lot tonight about NIL. We talked about the Garnet Trust beer that just came out with Steel Hands and how that's going to change the game and how that is going to be officially released at the Steel Hands kickoff party for Gamecock Central on August 19th. And one thing I want to throw in too, because I'll be there on the 12th, Steel Hands is also going to have former Gamecock football players taking on Clemson football players in the annual Steel Hands training camp. Always a fun event. Steven Garcia is going to be coming out there. We got Brandon Wilds is going to be there. Perry Orth, Michael Skarnecki is going to be there. There's some other players I can't say yet because they're a maybe. Some of those players, it comes down to whether or not they're signed by an NFL team in the coming weeks. If they aren't, we're hoping that they will be out there. I mean, selfishly, for all of Gamecock fans, we want to see them go and sign with an NFL team. But if they're not, we're hoping that they will be there. Intern Joe, get some sleep, man.
Yeah.
Enjoy the break. Enjoy the break back home. And Gamecock football. We are officially here in August. The pads will go on this month. And then a month from tomorrow, South Carolina will take on North Carolina in Bank of America Stadium for week 1. College football season, it is officially here. Appreciate everyone that tuned in tonight. We will do it again next week. What an exciting day, though, for Gamecock football.